Hello everyone, welcome back. So, apologies for the really long break in between videos. Just was recovering from my surprisingly heavy-hitting cold. But we're back today. We're continuing our read on Bendy the Lost Ones, and hopefully nothing bad happens. Apologies for the ending of that last video. I lost the placement of my computer. But let's get into this book and hopefully we remember something. Chapter 31. Bill, you are coming to the dinner tonight. I have no idea why my father still insists that I perform the dutiful son act. Jesus, I guess I'm not fully healed. Goddamn. Especially today. After everything. Did he want me to show up wrapped in bandages? Did he want me to apologize for Constance? The latter was not happening. Maybe he intended to publicly humiliate me. It was always a possibility. I stood out. I stood in front of my long mirror, looking at myself all dressed and ready in my three-piece suit and pocket square. The sun had set, so I hid a small lamp beside me, cast a strange shadow, and made my face look even more gaunt. Whatever. I removed the bandages and cleaned up the cut on my forehead. It was smaller than I imagined under the wrappings, but it still stung to the touch. I pushed my hair forward to hide it. It looked unkempt, not the usual slick back appropriate appearance. I like that. I like not looking appropriate, even as the thought twisted with discomfort in my stomach. How could I go to dinner after everything? How could it be night again so soon? How could I ever live through another night without thinking about everything, without this gnawing fear in my stomach? I could hear the wind blowing outside, the branches of a large oak tree tapping at my window. This happened when the wind blew and I was used to it. As a child, I'd been so scared of it, thinking a ghost was floating just outside, and I'd hide my head under my covers for fear of seeing anything. The branches tapped again, but I was compelled for some reason to glance over at the window. The darkness that loomed just outside the window. A black silhouette of a face. Outside my second-story window. I stumbled backward, tripping on my heels, my heart beating fast. It was impossible. It was a trick of light, surely. Old memories haunting me again. I looked again. The face was gone. I steadied myself and took a deep breath. I was terrified, but I approached the window slowly to look out. I looked down at the tree branches creaking in the wind. I saw the road and the sidewalk. I saw emptiness. I knew what was happening. I had read enough books to know how people dealing with guilt and fear manifested their nightmares as reality. It was all my fault. All of it. I had been told to keep a secret, and what I'd done, showing it off like some trophy because I liked a girl. So it was Constance's fault then. No. That was wrong and thoughtless. Something my father would say. He would find anyone else to blame. He was a master of it. I backed away slowly from the window and turned into my room. I noticed then just how dark it was. How the single lamp by my mirror made all the corners all that darker. Like shadows seeping into the room. I tried to shake the feeling and returned to my mirror to straighten my tie. My hands were trembling, but I was almost used to that now. Fear was just starting to become a part of me. Never leaving, always there, in charge. I heard a sound and whipped around to look into the dark corner of my room. There was nothing. Of course there was nothing. Why couldn't I control this fear? It was unmanly and unmannerly. Have some self-control, Bill. You aren't a child anymore. You're almost 18. There aren't ghosts outside the window. There aren't monsters under your bed or hiding in the shadows. And yet, they do exist. Underground. Here, in Atlantic City. Not so far away. My eyes focused in on the dark, on the emptiness. I felt that pull like I had been in the room with the machine. I felt drawn into the darkness. It reminded me of that feeling when you are standing on a high balcony and looking down at the ground. You know you aren't going to jump, but maybe. I shook my head. No, no. I refuse to allow my mind to go there. I turned back to the mirror and saw a tall black silhouette standing behind me. I jumped and turned, my heart in my throat, my breath constricted and tight. Nothing. No one. But still in my mind's eye I could see the figure, faceless like a shadow. It stared into the darkness once more. I took in a deep breath and walked slowly towards the corner, reaching my hands out in front of me, just to see, just to know, just to touch. I am losing my mind. My fingers touched the wall. I only found empty blackness, and at the spot where the two walls met. I released a sigh and felt my body relax even if my mind was still racing. I turned and leaned against the wall, staring now at the lamp that seemed far away somehow, even if it was just across the room. This was a kind of madness. It had to be. I slid down and sat on the ground, placed my hands next to me on the floor, just to ground me, to make me solid and not a mass of shaking jelly. The floor was wet. I raised my hands. They were covered in ink. "There's my boy. Better late than never," boomed my father as I entered the private room on the second floor of the restaurant. I felt strangely winded from the climb, but I knew it wasn't because of the stairs. I had rushed to change my inky clothes, and then I had them under the bed like a child hiding an inappropriate novel from a parent. My hands were still stained no matter how hard I washed them. Fainter now, but still with a coating of black. I had to put gloves on, but I was already feeling too warm. It was a disaster. I couldn't do this, but I had to. So I smiled and laughed and gave an awkward wave at the gathered crowd. It was more than just the men from New York this time. I was relieved to see. But there was also the usual game I was familiar seeing at my parents' parties. My father's party. His mom's dead. I forgot about that. There was Mr. Brown and Madame Turquette and her daughter, and Mr. and Mrs. Sawyer, always quietly shy on the edges of the crowd. There was also a few others I didn't recognize. Everyone was milling about, drinking cocktails, and I joined Madame Turquette and said hello. "My goodness, but are you growing fast?" she said as we kissed the air beside each other's cheeks. "Well, you don't change a bit," I said. She laughed and I felt myself relax a little. Mindless small talk. I was always comforted in that. "Gent, it's a contracting firm here based with offices all over the eastern seaboard." I turned so fast my drink sloshed over the side of my glass. I stared at one of the most beautiful women I'd ever seen. And I'd seen plenty here in Atlantic City. We didn't just have singers and dancers, we had guests from all over the world. And and we hosted the Miss America pageant. And yet I stared at this woman. She seemed to glow from the inside out, dressed in an all-white satin gown that glinted in the light. Her hair was so blonde that it almost matched. She was like an angel. The angel noticed me. "Yes?" she asked with a lovely, melodic voice. "I'm so sorry. I heard you say something about Jet." I floated over there. I finally felt like there was no one else in the room. She smiled, and I just about died. I felt like there was an arrow in my heart, but strangely in a good way. "My boyfriend's a manager for the company," she said. "Your boyfriend?" I thought Mr. Connor, gruff rough around the edges. Mr. Connor, was he the manager? I thought he was, but he couldn't be. Could he? Not if this elegant creature was this manager's partner. Yes, Thomas Connor, fine fellow, brilliant mind, tedious conventionalist. A tall man in an elegant suit and a twinkle in his eye joined us. "Joey Drew," he said, extending his hand. I took it. Wasn't he the man Mr. Connor had been talking about? My memory was foggy, filled only with images from last night. I couldn't push past them all to focus the conversation. "It's nice to meet you," I said as I shook hands. "I'm Bill Chambers." "The son," said Joey. "I am." "Well, it's a pleasure. This lovely creature is the famous actress Alison Pendel. I'm sure you heard of her." I smiled to indicate I had, but to be perfectly honest, I had not. If you haven't heard of her, you've definitely heard of her. You definitely heard her. She voices my darling Alice Angel. Alice Angel? Why was that so familiar? Joey Drew. "You're the animation man," I said, finally understanding. "Joey Drew Studios, the Bendy cartoons." Joey smiled at me, slightly tight-lipped. I didn't think I'd said anything wrong. It'd take me a moment with the state of my brain to remember, but in the end, "I love your cartoons," I said. I said. It wasn't quite true. I think as a child, I believe there was some War Bond advertisement with the characters as well. I had a little memory of them. War was my favorite, I added. Well, thank you, replied Joey, still tight-lipped. Quickly changed the subject, I thought. It was going to go quite badly for some reason. What brings you to Atlantic City? Well, son, I've always been a fan. Those are the places that light up the world. This city is like having a living, breathing amusement park. You familiar with Bertram Piedmont? Asked Joey with renewed energy. Shook my head no. He's an incredible park engineer. He's working on some new projects for me, and he suggested I make a visit to see the new developments happening said. Something developments happening here. Said I should ring. Oh, my brain didn't burn up. Developments happening. Said I should ring out your dad. There's something being built. My father's financing it. I said. Your father does well for himself, said Joey. It was a statement that felt like a question. Suppose he does, yes. Joey smiled. Well, maybe someday he and I will work together on something. I do like working with the best. And that was my in. You also work with Thomas Connor, correct? Joey's smile faltered a little. I do. I heard there were some complications of some machine or other. Careful, Bill, my gut told me. This was a dangerous territory. Couldn't let them know what happened. Couldn't let them know what had happened. I knew there was dark secrets about that machine, but I needed to know. If not for my own sake, for Constance. Brave Constance, who told my father what was what and did it with her chin held high. Who told you that? Asked Joey. Who told you that? Asked Joey. Mr. Connor himself. You know my Tom? Asked Allison sweetly. There was no hint of digging its own deeper in how she spoke. Yes, I do, I replied. I turned to her and I was immediately overcome by her radiance once more. I would grow gent sometimes, as a lark. I enjoy fixing things. I met Mr. Connor on occasion. This machine you mentioned, have you seen it? Asked Joey. That fear, that feeling that had haunted me ever since yesterday, filled me to the top full just then. He couldn't know what I had seen. He couldn't know any of the things I knew. I wouldn't tell him. No, I don't really know what it is. He doesn't talk much about it, just been a product for someone in New York. He said that, didn't he? The man looked very different suddenly, like a dark cloud had passed over him. Nothing had changed, not his smile or his posture, but I could sense something dangerous. What does it do? I asked. I hadn't meant to be so direct. I intended to be quite the opposite. To stop talking about the subject, to compliment Allison's dress, to walk away and stand in a corner until dinner was served. But somehow I asked my most desired question, the question I had since the day Mr. Connor and I fixed the machine. What does it do? Allison laughed again, a laugh that danced happily in the air. You'll never get these boys to tell you anything about their secret inventions. Trust me, I've tried. She winked at me. Joey leaned in with a slight smile and said, Have you ever considered, my boy, that your reality is no more real than the dream I had last night? I had not considered that, no, I replied. Well, consider it now. I will. The little dinner bell was rung at just that moment. Come on, split the pages, please. A little saving grace in a strange situation. I had parted ways with them and took my assigned seat down in between Mrs. and Mrs. Sawyer and Mr. Brown, two very harmless people who loved my father unconventionally, and therefore I could say nothing accidentally to ruin his reputation. For my part, I was glad to be as far away from the animator as voice actress. I had no idea what he meant, and I had no desire to consider my own existence in that way. But I did think for a moment that my reality was so unbelievable it could only be a nightmare for him. Maybe he was right in that way. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe Constance had a point. These people, Mr. Connor, Joey, even the magnificent Allison, these people were different somehow. They were up to something unnatural. What we had experienced, what had happened to Brant, that was not something that just happens. It was something created by humans, like the bombs that fell from the sky during the war. What sort of people invented something like that? What sort of people have a creature that stalked its prey like that underground, deep in the secret places that still exist from secret pasts? I need to speak with Constance again. I need to tell her about these people. I need to tell her she's right. Chapter 32. Constance. I held the little jar delicately in my hand. The beetle crawled along the inside, trying to find an escape, but falling onto its back instead. There was something about staring at this little living creature that made me hesitate. Then I wondered why. What was I afraid of? I planned on squishing my first pie in the restaurant, stomping on it and walking away with no further thought. Still, I shivered. The walls of the apartment were thin, silly, and useless. I turned the jar around and the beetle fell again, its little legs flailing. I stared at it and then imagined being the beetle in the bottle. I imagined being watched closely and carefully, examined. Suddenly looked over my shoulder and I felt like maybe Molly or Lily was standing there quietly in the doorway, but no one was there. Just a dark hallway. I felt very aware of myself right now, of being in a small pool of light at my desk. How vulnerable that could appear. How vulnerable I felt. I felt aware, too, of the darkness, as a living thing. Like the creeping shadows that had stalked us the other night. I had a vision of blackness outside my door, suddenly bursting in a wave into my room, swallowing me up, drowning me. Standing quickly, I marched over to the door and shut it. I felt a wave of relief. Then that familiar feeling of anger. I was frustrated with myself for being so weak, for fearing monsters in the dark. Whatever we had considered was far away and locked underground. Or was it? Well, I was determined to find out, with or without this help of the stupid knucklehead boy. Holy hell. Whew. Stupid knucklehead boys. Problem was getting back to the machine. I heard a strange sob then, quiet and almost like the wind, or the creaking of a floorboard. But it wasn't. It wasn't my imagination either. It was a soft, desperate sound. Someone was in pain. Was it one of my sisters? I stirred and climbed my head over and placed my ear on the wall. Silence. Good. Molly and Lily were well. I got up and went to the opposite wall and shared her with my parents and did the same. More silence. I turned and listened carefully, straining to hear the sound again. I closed my eyes as if shutting off my other senses might help me with this one. Make this one stronger. Something grabbed me hard by the wrist. I opened my eyes and yanked my arm away. Get off me! I shouted to the empty dark corner in front of me. I whirled around. Nothing. Nobody. I marched towards the switch for the overhead light and switched it on. My room filled with light, and I examined it carefully. Again, there was nothing. No, this wasn't right. I didn't believe it was my imagination. Someone was playing a game with me. I glanced at the light switch that I still held between my fingers and noticed that the black stain over the wrist of my sleeve of my nightgown. A black handprint where it had been grabbed, wet and fresh and oh, still there. I wasn't frightened then. I felt angry that something had dared to attack me. I felt anger that it had just run away, disappeared like a coward. You want to fight me? Attack me. Drag me away and kill me? Just you try it. I was feeling so energized, my skin was buzzing. I could face anything right now. This anger was fuel. It was amazing. I raced back to my desk and opened the little jar. The beetle couldn't climb out of it, and that was good because I needed my other hand for this. I grabbed the sleeve of my nightgown and squeezed the fresh black ooze into the jar. Like wringing out a towel after washing dishes. Several drops fell into the jar and onto the beetle. I smiled and quickly sealed up the jar again. I looked at my hand as it stained black prints on the outside of the jar. Then I smiled. Now we wait and see. Chapter 33. I stared at the black stain on my floor the next morning. In the light of day, I had hoped for some logical explanation, like how a shadowy figure in the night turns out to be a coat rack by day. But no, my floor was stained with black ink. It had dried, and before it had wandered. I could see the jagged, reaching stain, those fingers of ink, just like in the Prohibition factory, just like over Brant's body. The ink had clawed itself forward, searching for something. It had not found it. There had been a monster in my room last night. Was it the same one that clawed at my ankle in the dark? I assumed so. How could it not be? The thought that there being more than just one was too much for me to handle. I quickly dragged my armchair into the corner, hiding the ink beneath it. I did not need any of the servants trying to clean it up and getting in trouble. I dressed quickly and with great purpose, left my house only to stop a few blocks away, and I had no idea where I was going. How was I going to find Constance? Finding me was so much easier. Our house was well known, largest in the neighborhood. To find someone who would help dress chorus girls and lived with her sisters and parents in a city like this. This was going to be much harder of a task. The chorus girls. That was it. I could meet her at the theater tonight. That would do the trick. I would apologize and tell her what happened last night. All of it. The ink, meeting Joey Drew fellow. Of course, there was until the afternoon to fill until then. I had another idea. I was brought a coffee as I sat on a plush green settee in the foyer of the hotel. Thank you, Johnson, I said. The old man in the plaza uniform nodded as I turned, and I had a memory of then playing hide-and-seek with him when I was young. The hotel had been my playground, and I'd loved it even more than the bench just outside. Now the hotel just felt like a weight pressing down on me, a reminder of things to come. There were days I wanted to run away from it all, start a new life, maybe on the West Coast. Things there seemed bright and fresh. Everyone had something behind. Left something behind. When I turned 18, maybe I would. Maybe. The problem with fear is that while running, you can feel just perfect. There's also the fear of actually running away, of what that would mean, of where to go and who to be, of being without the safety net of my father's connection and wealth. Why was I so afraid? It was exhausting, but the feeling just persisted on, lingering like a toothache. He entered the hotel like he was walking onto the stage. There he was, in his finely tailored pinstripe suit, the Mr. Joey Drew from last night. I sank deeper into the settee and pulled my hat lower. All I could see was his feet now, as he almost danced his way across the floor. His shoes were freshly polished and made of a fine leather. I had not seen shoes that well made in a long time. I wondered at the man's wealth. He was too showy for it to be old money, and that was for certain. He was joined then by another pair of shoes, or I should say boots. Those I recognized, though I did not find it interesting. I noticed them at all in the first place. They were brown, well-worn, and huge. Surprised to see them. My plan had just been to keep an eye on the Joey person. There he was. He made things a little more difficult. I sank a little lower. Tom, my good man, it's wonderful to see you again, said the shiny shoes. Let's go, replied the boots. Always in a hurry, replied the shiny shoes. Just like getting the job done. The boots turned and made their way towards the exit. Shiny shoes stayed still for a moment and followed. I raised my hat and watched the retreating backs of Mr. Connor and Joey. I had to follow them. I had to do it quickly, even as my nerves kept me rooted to the spot. I managed to jump to my feet, spilling some coffee on the green settee. I looked down. A dark liquid seeped into the fabric and disappeared. I clenched my fist. I was still wearing gloves. The ink on my hand was almost gone, but not quite. Not quite. I had to follow them. I chased them out of the hotel and ran right into Mr. Connor. I fell backward on the sidewalk, right on my backside. I felt like I was running face first into the wall. You following us, Bill? Said Mr. Connor, looking down at me. Joey joined him. Together they loomed over me like distorted cartoon characters, which was fitting, I suppose. No, Mr. Connor, I replied. Come on, could use your help. Mr. Connor extended a meaty hand, and I took it. He helped me standing. Sure this is a good idea? Asked Joey, who seemed quite sure of the answer. Could use the help. He helped before. Mr. Connor turned and started walking again as Joey and I stared at each other. If you knew about the machine, why didn't you say so? Asked Joey. I wasn't sure if he was trying to trick me, but this point honestly felt like the best policy. Let's keep it a secret from Mr. Connor. Joey thought about that, and suddenly his whole disposition brightened. Well, that is something, isn't it? He smiled and gave me a heady pat on the back. We better catch up. We don't want to get on Tom's bad side, he said with a grin. I smiled back, not sure if I was considered a friend yet, but I was happy to have won him over for the moment. We walked speedily to catch up with Mr. Connor, who was waiting for us by his truck. As I climbed in and got squished in the middle of the bench, I asked, What about Scott? Mr. Connor didn't say anything. He just started the truck and we were on our way. Considering the company and the direction we were heading, I assumed our end destination would be the prohibition factory. I was not happy about this. But what had I expected to find if I followed them? Of course, this is where they were going, and I simply had to deal with the real fact that I was about to enter a place where I had seen a man explode and a monster chase me in the dark. I laughed at myself at the everyday thought of simply having to deal with it. This was not something one simply did. What amuses you, friend? Asked Joey. Oh, it's nothing, I replied, absent-mindedly rubbing my hands together. He didn't press, which was good, because my life of me couldn't single thing a joke I could use as an excuse. Knock, knock. Who's that? Brant. Brant who? That was all his mind could tell me, repeating the same phrase over and over. Brant who? Indeed. They have a family, but they're missing him, but the police start looking for him. Brant who? We pulled to a stop, and as usual, and with no ceremony, Mr. Connor opened his door and jumped out of the truck. I was a little shocked. We were at the factory. It was a little grimy part of the town, a dirty little corner bar, evidently called The Way Out. Joey opened his door casually and slipped out of the truck. Even as Mr. Connor walked with purpose and opened the door to the bar, he disappeared inside before Joey could adequately close the truck door in my face. Sorry about that, kid, he said with a grin and opened it again. I smiled and stepped down the sidewalk, staring at the bar. I didn't understand anything right now, but I wish Constance was with me. We stepped into the dark, dingy bar, both of us moving our hats as we did and looking around. It was early afternoon, so there weren't many people there, and those who were seemed like they'd been there, as if they were part of the furniture. Dust particles floated in the air in the sunbeams and landed on drink rings on the table, but seemed to illuminate nothing else. Come on, said Mr. Connor, across from the room. He was at a door by the sticky bar, and we followed him into the back room of dark paneled wood. There was a table and chairs piled up on top. There was a stale smell in the air. And when I walked over to join Mr. Connor by one of the wood panels, my foot stuck in the floor slightly for each step. This isn't exactly what I had in mind, Tom, said Joey, sticky stepping his way to us. I told you the other entrance is out of order, replied Mr. Connor. Other entrance. You fix things for a living, Tom, replied Joey. Mr. Connor shook his head and pressed the wood panel. It slipped back an inch from the wall, and he dragged it to the side. Some things are just broken for good. He stepped through the hole. I didn't think it was good form to follow, so I extended my hand to allow Joey the right of way. He took it without even acknowledging me, and I followed behind him in the dark. We found ourselves in a tunnel sloping downward on a steady climb. It flattened out soon enough, and Mr. Connor turned on a flashlight ahead of us. Stay to the right, he ordered, and just as he did, my leg caught the edge of something, and I stumbled forward. Ow. Mr. Connor turned the flashlight on me, and then to the left of the tunnel, it pointed with it. There was a metal table next to us. Or no, not a table. As Mr. Connor dragged the light along the wall, it revealed a long conveyor belt. For crates, kid, said Joey, beside me. Crates of liquor. I nodded. Okay, enough sightseeing, said Mr. Connor. He had the flashlight in front of him, lighting the large tunnel and showcasing the black void in the distance. His hulking silhouette led the way and we followed. A point of light with darkness behind us and darkness before us. I understand now what was happening. The dread filled me with every step we took. Obviously there'd be more than one entrance into the whiskey factory. There was another way out the entire time. That we could have gone out a different way. That Brant who? Something darted across the path of light in front of us. Did you see that? I asked, stopping short. No one else stopped. They just kept walking, the light getting further away from me. The darkness surrounding me like shadows climbing up a wall. I ran to catch up and held my breath as we approached the spot where I'd seen something. Nothing happened, so I allowed my breath in a long, silent sigh. Bill! I cried out as I fell flat on my face on the rough floor, something heavy on my back, something that knew my name. I tried to push it off, tried to turn it over, but it was squirming and fighting back, leaning hard on me, so my face was rubbing against the gravel on the ground. I couldn't even cry for help. The wind was being crushed out of me. I heard the sounds of a scuffle above me and the sounds of a fight, yells, and the mighty grunt as something was pulled off of me in one fell swoop. I scrambled on my back, sitting there on the cold cement floor, panting hard, trying desperately to fill up my lungs as fast as I could. The flashlight had fallen and was shining directly at Joey's gleaming shoes. In a distance, I could see the faint shadow of Mr. Connor in a struggle. Quickly reached over and grabbed the flashlight as I got to my feet. I shot at Mr. Connor over Joey's shoulder. Mr. Connor was holding a figure upright, a hand at each side of his upper torso. He wasn't just holding them upright, he was holding him dangling in the air, his toes just grazing the ground. The figure's clothes and hair were drenched in black ink. It was not yet fully covered, not like Brant had been. This figure, you could see his face, his wild eyes. It was Scott. "What's going on?" I demanded. "Calm down," said Connor to Scott as he thrashed above the air. "He's coming. He's coming for all of you," he screamed. He suddenly looked directly at me, at the beam of light. His eyes glowed in the light, and his face contorted into a grotesque grimace. "Make him quiet," said Joey, coming up beside me in an angry hiss. "How do you think I should do that?" asked Mr. Connor, glancing at us. His arms were strained with the effort of holding the twisting Scott. "Just do it," ordered Joey. "It's all your fault," Scott spat at Joey. "You're the real monster." "Tom, how are you going to silence me, Drew? What do you want him to do to me?" Scott started laughing. It was high-pitched and pierced my ears. The sound echoed in the tunnel. "Do it," ordered Joey. Scott thrashed again, and Mr. Connor struggled to keep hold of him. He twisted and turned and leaned down and bit Mr. Connor's hand. Instinctively, Mr. Connor let go, and Scott wrenched himself out of his grip and immediately ran off into the dark. It was a hollow thud in the darkness as Mr. Connor and I raced to follow him. Scott was lying on the ground, unconscious. The tunnel had turned at a 90-degree angle, and he charged right into it. I reached up and touched the wound on my forehead. I thought about how I got it. I backed away slowly from Scott. "Good," said Joey, joining us. "Leave him here to sleep it off. Come on." He grabbed the flashlight out of my hand and continued down the tunnel. Mr. Connor carefully adjusted Scott to make sure he was more comfortable and stared at his body for a quiet moment. The light got dimmer and dimmer, and I stared at Scott and Mr. Connor. I felt the need to say something. "What do you mean by monster?" I asked quietly. "I already told you about that," he replied. "What is going on? Please tell me." It sounded pathetic. It sounded too desperate, like a small child. My father would not have approved. I was not coming at this conversation from a place of authority. "I can't," said Mr. Connor quietly. He stood up and looked at the light disappearing down the tunnel in the distance. "We need to fix the machine. We need to take it back to New York ASAP." "All right," I said, but inside me was a mess of anxiety and fear. How could they possibly do that? How could they move the machine at all, knowing that there's some creature on the loose? Would they just leave it here to haunt Atlantic City for all time? Or would they take it with them to one of the biggest cities in America to potentially unleash the horrors there? "Let's go," said Mr. Connor. "I can't. I couldn't. Couldn't go back there. Couldn't be punished. After everything I've just seen." "Don't be a fool. Come on." I could barely see Mr. Connor anymore. Joey had left us literally in the dark. "No. Who do you think he was ordering me around? I was William Chambers, the heir to all of Atlantic City. Heck, probably own these tunnels as well." I turned to my heel and started retracing my steps in the dark. "Bill!" called out Mr. Connor, but I was done. I was not going to end up like Brant or Scott. I knew deep down how close I'd come, how close I was. I felt a madness inside me that I was assured was a human reaction to a horrific situation. But now I wasn't sure. Now I didn't know what was happening to me. I turned the corner and picked up speed. It was a straight shot to the bar now. When the ground started to rise, I felt a wave of relief and it burst into the back room from behind the panel like water breaking through a dam. I stood in the room for a moment and collected myself as best as I could. There was fear that would not go away. I thought long and hard. I need to find Constance. Chapter 24. Constance. The beetle was dead, not because of the ink and had been poisoned. I watched all night and it got more and more agitated. As I raced in tiny circles in the jar, as it wore itself out and then stopped moving. I opened the jar and then carefully taken it out, laying it on a cloth on my desk. The ink had an effect on its behavior. This much I had understood. But what kind of effect? I didn't understand it. Had it made the beetle want to run and run? It seemed very specific on that kind of reaction. I tried to stay calm in my frustration. I wanted answers, I needed answers, but when Molly knocked on my door, I was too quick to yell at her, too angry at her for interrupting me. What do you think she was doing? She was trying to solve a delicate problem. What was the ink? Mother wants help with breakfast, she said, sounding surprised at my response. I'm sick, I said bluntly. Oh no, did she catch my cold? She sounded genuinely concerned. Of course she did. She was the sweetest, kindest girl. I always tried to be just like her. But I wasn't her. I had complicated, messy thoughts. I wanted to shout from the rooftops. I hated to think about it. But in so many ways, I was more like Lily. Except Lily had no reservations, just being herself. Who was I? What was I? I shook my head to knock the thought out of it. Then I looked at my sleeve, the inky black handprint. I wasn't scared. I wasn't determined. Yes, I said. Oh dear, would you like me to bring you some soup? Some tea? Just go away. I didn't shout, but there was an edge in my voice. I was so close to a situation, she kept interrupting me. I had this vision, then, of sitting on the Ferris wheel at the steel pier, sitting at the very top, and then just screaming. I sighed hard. I felt a wave of exhaustion pass over me. I had, after all, been up all night. But it was more like that. It was something deep inside me, something buried deep, a part of my soul that had been crying out for so long and was so very tired. I stared at the beetle. It had run and run and run and run until I was very tired. Something clicked inside of me. Could it be? Oh, how I wish I could talk to Bill about all this. I wish he cared. How could he not care? It was so unfeeling, so dismissive and horrid. Rich boys and their lack of empathy. I stood in a rush of anger and let out a frustrated sigh. And yelled. My chair fell backward and onto the floor. Are you alright? It was Molly again at the door. Yes, I'm perfectly fine, I said, balling my hands into fists. But I wasn't. This wasn't normal. Even though it felt right, even though I had never felt more like myself, none of this was normal. Sharing my feelings, letting them take over, not being in control. It all clicked together. The ink. The ink was doing something to me. Even though I had washed it all away, I clearly hadn't. Somewhere inside me it lurked. And then it was unleashing these tightly kept feelings, these carefully concealed emotions. I didn't want to run in circles, but I did want to be free. Picked up my chair and sat again at my desk. My gloves were still sitting there in the middle of all of my little vials and experiments. I took a deep breath. It was time to clean them. Alright. That is our way to chapter 25. Thank you all for bearing with me until my comeback, and thank you all for listening. If you have any requests for music or anything else, just let me know. I hope you all have a great day, night, whatever time you're listening to this. Bye-bye.